Emily could not take it anymore. For months, she had watched Jason drift further away. The late night calls had disappeared. The surprise visits had stopped. The man who once made her feel like the most important person in the world now treated her like an afterthought. And deep down, she already knew why. One evening, after another unanswered message, Emily made a decision. She called Jason. To her surprise, he answered. Hello, we need to talk. Jason immediately sensed the seriousness in her voice. Emily, not on the phone. A long silence followed. Finally, Jason sighed. Okay. They agreed to meet at a small restaurant they used to visit years ago, a place filled with memories, the place where Jason had first told her he loved her, the place where they had celebrated promotions, birthdays, and anniversaries, a place that once represented happiness, but tonight felt different. When Emily arrived, Jason was already there. He stood up politely as she approached. Neither smiled, neither looked happy. The tension between them was impossible to ignore. For a few moments, neither spoke. Then Emily finally broke the silence. Who is she? Jason froze. The question hit him harder than expected. What? The woman you've been spending all your time with. Jason looked away. Emily nodded slowly. His reaction told her everything. There is someone. It's not like that. Emily laughed bitterly. It never is. Jason remained silent. The silence only made things worse. For months, Emily had fought against her suspicions. Now they were becoming reality. Do you love her? The question felt like a knife. Jason opened his mouth, then closed it again because he didn't know how to answer. Did he love Victoria or did he love what she represented? The wealth, the opportunities, the future. Jason smiled sadly because at that moment he finally understood the cost of his choices. He has spent years chasing wealth only to discover that character mattered more. He had abandoned genuine love only to learn that money could never replace loyalty. The truth was that he no longer knew, and that uncertainty hurt Emily more than any answer could have. Tears filled her eyes. After everything we've been through, Jason lowered his head. Guilt flooded through him. Emily had stood by him during difficult years, when money was tight, when opportunities were scarce, when nobody believed in him. She had believed, she had supported him, she had sacrificed, and now he was struggling to give her the one thing she deserved: honesty. Emily, his voice cracked, but she raised her hand. Don't. The tears finally rolled down her cheeks. I already know. For several seconds, neither spoke. The relationship that had once seemed unbreakable was falling apart before their eyes, and neither knew how to stop it. Finally, Emily stood up. Her legs felt weak, her heart felt shattered, but she refused to cry in front of him any longer. I hope she's worth it. Those words hit Jason harder than anything else she had said. Emily turned and walked away. This time she didn't look back. Jason remained seated long after she left, staring at the empty chair across from him, feeling something he had not felt in a long time: fear, because despite everything he had gained, something important had just slipped away. Meanwhile, Victoria faced a different battle. Her father had become increasingly vocal about Jason. Every family dinner seemed to include his name. Every conversation somehow returned to him. One evening, Richard finally stopped pretending. I think Jason will make an excellent husband. Victoria nearly dropped her fork. Dad, I'm serious. Victoria sighed heavily. Not again. Richard continued. He has ambition. He has discipline. He knows how to build a future. Everything Ethan supposedly lacked. Victoria already knew where the conversation was heading. You still don't approve of Ethan. Richard's expression hardened. No. The answer came immediately. No, I don't. Victoria felt frustration rising. You don't even give him a chance. I've given him plenty of chances. Richard's voice remained calm. But every time I look at him, I see someone who refuses to take responsibility. Victoria looked away. Part of her hated hearing those words. Another part of her feared they might be true. Because Ethan's life had remained largely unchanged. He still jumped between opportunities, still struggled with consistency, still talked more about future plans than actual progress. Even so, Victoria loved him, and love rarely listened to logic. A few days later, Ethan asked to meet her. The moment they sat down together, Victoria noticed something. He seemed frustrated, angry, tired. I can't keep doing this. Victoria's heart sank. What do you mean? Ethan leaned forward. Your father is never going to accept me. Victoria remained silent because she had begun to realize the same thing. Ethan continued. And now this Jason guy is everywhere. The jealousy in his voice was obvious. Victoria reached for his hand. Ethan. No. He shook his head. I'm serious. For months, Ethan had tried to stay patient, tried to trust her. But now he felt as though he was slowly losing her. Not to another man, but to another lifestyle. A lifestyle he could not compete with. You belong in that world. Victoria's eyes widened. What? The rich people, the powerful people, the successful people. Ethan, you do. Victoria immediately shook her head. No. But even she knew things were changing. The pressure from her father was becoming impossible to ignore. The pressure from society was growing stronger. And for the first time, doubt entered her mind. Could love alone really be enough? Back to Sterling's holdings. Jason buried himself in work, partly to distract himself, partly to avoid thinking about Emily. But guilt followed him everywhere, at meetings, at events, at home. He kept replaying their final conversation, our tears, our disappointment, our heartbreak. The memory haunted him. Yet, despite the guilt, he continued moving forward. And the closer he moved toward the Stanley family, the harder it became to turn back. Weeks later, Richard invited Jason to a private dinner at the family mansion. Only a few people attended. The atmosphere felt personal, almost intentional. After dinner, Richard and Jason found themselves alone on a terrace overlooking the gardens. For several moments, neither spoke. Then Richard broke the silence. You care about Victoria. Jason froze. The statement wasn't a question, it was an observation. Richard smiled slightly. And I believe she cares about you too. Jason's mind raced. He knew exactly what Richard was implying. The billionaire turned towards him. You have a bright future ahead of you. Jason remained silent. Richard continued. I think you and Victoria will make a good team. The word echoed in Jason's mind. A good team, a future. an opportunity. Everything he had spent years chasing seemed to be standing directly in front of him. And for the first time, Jason stopped fighting the temptation because deep down he had already begun making his choice, a choice that would break one heart and possibly destroy several more. 3 months later, everything seemed perfect, at least on the surface. Jason had become one of the most trusted people within Stanley's holdings. His influence inside the company continued to grow. Richard Stanley relied on him more than ever. And perhaps most importantly, Jason and Victoria were now officially together. The announcement quickly spread through business circles. Friends congratulated them. The media celebrated them. Many people described them as the perfect couple, successful, elegant, powerful. Everything appeared to be falling into place. For Jason, it felt like the reward he had spent years chasing, the luxurious lifestyle, the exclusive events, the powerful connections, the respect that came with being associated with one of the country's wealthiest families. Everything he once dreamed about was finally becoming reality. Meanwhile, Emily was doing her best to move forward. The breakup had broken her heart. For weeks, she struggled to accept what had happened. But eventually, she stopped waiting for calls that would never come, stopped hoping Jason would return, stopped blaming herself. Instead, she focused on rebuilding her life, returning to old goals, pursuing new opportunities, learning how to be happy without him. The pain remained, but little by little she became stronger. On the other side of the city, Ethan was struggling much more. The news of Victoria and Jason's relationship had devastated him. For months, he had fought to hold on to hope, but now that hope was gone. The woman he loved had chosen a different future, or at least that's what it looked like. One evening, Ethan sat alone staring at a photograph of himself and Victoria. Memories flooded his mind. The laughter, the dreams, the promises. Everything felt distant now. Yet, despite the heartbreak, one question continued to bother him. Had Victoria truly chosen Jason, or had she simply surrendered to pressure? The question refused to leave his mind. Meanwhile, preparations for Jason and Victoria's future continued. Richard could not have been happier. In Jason, he saw everything he wanted for his daughter: a man with ambition, a man with discipline, a man capable of protecting the Sterling legacy. At families' dinners, business events, and private meetings, Richard increasingly treated Jason like family, and Jason enjoyed every moment of it. For the first time in his life, he felt accepted among people he once admired from a distance. One evening, during a private dinner at the Stanley Mansion, Richard made a surprising announcement. I've decided to increase your responsibilities. Jason looked up. Sir? Richard smiled. I want you involved in some of our most important operations. Jason felt honored. The trust meant everything to him. What he didn't realize was that the decision would soon place him directly in the path of a disaster capable of destroying everything. Several weeks later, unusual rumors began circulating within financial circles. At first, nobody paid attention. Large corporations attracted rumors all the time, but these rumors were different. Government investigators had reportedly begun examining several major companies. including Stanley Holdings. When Jason first heard the story, he dismissed it. Surely it was nothing serious. Companies faced audits and reviews all the time. There was no reason to panic. But Richard reacted differently. The moment the rumors reached him, concern appeared on his face, concern that Jason had never seen before. For the first time since meeting him, Richard Stanley looked nervous. Days later, investigators officially contacted Stanley's Holdings. The news spread quickly. Employees whispered in hallways. Executives held emergency meetings. Questions multiplied, but answers remained scarce. Jason tried convincing himself everything will be fine. Yet something felt wrong, very wrong. One afternoon, while reviewing company documents, he noticed unusual transactions, large amounts of money moving through accounts in ways that seemed difficult to explain. At first, he assumed there was a reasonable explanation, but the deeper he looked, the more uncomfortably he became. Eventually, he requested clarification from one of the senior executives. The response was immediate. Don't ask questions. Jason frowned. The answer only increased his suspicion. For days, he couldn't stop thinking about it. Then came the shocking breakthrough. Government investigators publicly announced the discovery of evidence involving financial crimes linked to several companies connected to Stanley Holdings, money laundering, fraud, illegal offshore accounts. The accusation stunned the public. News channels exploded with coverage. Social media erupted. Business leaders scrambled to distance themselves, and suddenly the Stanley Empire stood at the center of a national scandal. Victoria could hardly believe it. Jason was equally shocked, but Richard knew the truth. The investigation was real, and the evidence was serious. For years, hidden beneath the success, luxury, and influence, dangerous secrets had existed. Secrets carefully buried, secrets protected by power. Now, those secrets were being exposed one by one. The pressure became overwhelming. Investors withdrew support, business partners disappeared, companies' shares collapsed. The empire Richard spent decades building began crumbling before his eyes. Then came the final blow. Authorities issued arrest warrants. Several executives were taken into custody, including Richard Stanley. The news shocked the nation. Television cameras surrounded the Stanley mansion. Reporters crowded every entrance. As police vehicles arrived, Victoria watched in disbelief. Her father, the man she had always viewed as powerful and untouchable, was being led away in handcuffs. Tears filled her eyes. The empire was gone. The reputation was gone. Everything was falling apart. And for the first time, Jason was forced to confront an uncomfortable truth. The future he had sacrificed so much to obtain no longer existed. The wealth, the influence, the power, all of it was disappearing. In a matter of weeks, his dream collapsed. That night, Jason sat alone in his apartment. The silence felt unbearable. His mind replayed every major decision he had made: leaving Emily, choosing ambition, ignoring his conscience, pursuing a life built on status. And now, what remained? The answer was painful: almost nothing. Meanwhile, Victoria faced her own reality. For years, She had been trapped between love and expectation, between Ethan and her father's wish. Now, the man who controlled her future was gone, and for the first time, she was free to choose for herself. A few days later, she called Ethan. When he answered, neither spoke for several seconds. Then Victoria whispered softly, "I'm sorry." Ethan closed his eyes. The voice he thought he had lost forever was finally back. And in that moment, both understood something important. True love had survived what wealth could not. Several months later, Richard Stanley was convicted for multiple financial crimes. His empire was dismantled. His assets were seized. His reputation destroyed. The man who once controlled everything now had nothing. Jason eventually resigned from Stanley Holdings. The company he once viewed as a gateway to success had become a reminder of painful mistakes. One afternoon, while walking through a quiet park, he unexpectedly saw Emily. For a moment, neither moved, neither spoke. Then Jason noticed something. Emily looked different, stronger, happy, at peace. The woman he once took for granted had rebuilt her life without him. As Emily walked away, Jason didn't call after her. He didn't ask for another chance. Some mistakes cannot be undone. Some lessons arrive too late. And as he watched her disappear into the distance, he realized the greatest loss of his life was never the fortune that vanished. It was the woman who had loved him when he had nothing.